Hello,
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Just fine. I'm gonna make sure that you can share. I just realized I did not click anything that hopefully you can. Um, See if you see a button down towards the bottom, I guess, that says share. You can
Yep.
share your screen. Good. That's very convenient.
All right, let's see. I'm going to share that.
Perfect.
Yes, just despite the rest of the world being very skilled at this is probably in the past 2 years only the fourth time I've done something like this.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, you're
As
doing
much
fine.
as I was in tech in my previous life, I just have not done a lot like this.
Well, tech is very different than it was even 5 years ago, much less
Oh,
than that. It's crazy. I always used a PC when I was working, and I've been on a Mac now for 5 years. And somebody asked me a PC question the other day, and I couldn't even speak the language. I had
yeah.
just it was just gone, which is fine. I didn't really enjoy it, but gee, it was crazy how quickly I had just reverted or converted or whatever.
Now, you said we had 57 people.
Yeah, I've signed up. That usually means about half of them will show. You never know though. Especially with this topic and the weather like it is. Goodness, they should all be sitting inside talking about the heat wave instead of.
That's And is 57 an average number? Is that above average? Is it,
Yeah, it's above average. That's a good
okay,
number. Yeah, very
well,
good.
hopefully, the extra marketing I did brought a few more people in.
Yeah, it must have because I saw a lot of names I had not seen before. So that's good, right?
Okay,
Yeah, because it does seem to be kind of the same. Even the non-master gardeners that show up are kind of the same group of people, and that makes sense. Once you hear about it, you're gonna keep in touch, kind of thing.
sure.
Is there anything particular you want me to say when I introduce you? I'll do like a 5 minute introduction of the program and meaning the Successful Gardener program and the Master Gardeners, and what we're going to talk about next month and what we're going to talk about this month, and then hand it off. It'll be less than 5 minutes probably.
All right. That works fine with me. I got everything here. I figure, I only have 14 slides and, that will leave plenty of time for questions because I really feel like that's as valuable a part, as my presentation.
Agreed. Then you find out what they're really interested in.
Yeah.
So normally what I do, and especially with a large group, I just have them put their questions in the chat box and then I will read them back. But since we've got so much time, and the main reason I do that is because people tend to like take over and you can't get them off that one question that absolutely nobody else cares about but them. And it's really hard to do in this world. It's easier in person because you can go touch them and tell them
Right.
to stop. So do you want me to let's start that way, and then if it seems like they're a pretty organized group, we can let them ask their questions. Is that, or follow up or something like that? Does that
I
make sense?
think, no, I think that's really a good idea is to take them in the chat and then you read them off and then I'll just encourage people, they can always reach out to me after this is over if the question wasn't answered.
Good.
As far as the list of attendees, um, can you share that so I can kind of see who I know?
Oh, yeah, hold on a second. You meant right now. I can tell you who's registered. I can't tell you. Well, I think I can. Now that I'm in this meeting, I'm not sure I can get back out there. Um,
Oh, that's fine. After it's all over, if
oh,
you
absolutely.
can send me who registered, I'm just curious to see my return on investment in marketing this prior to it.
Yeah, no,
You
perfect.
know, even if they don't show up, at least if they had acknowledged that they had seen it and registered, that, that's some good feedback for me.
Good, perfect. Yeah, I can absolutely do that. And if once, well, you can already see that a couple people have logged in, but you can go over to there's a little, I don't know, kind of like a person with some lines beside of them, and that will show you the participant list. So
Okay.
you may be able to just see as we go.
Hi, everybody. This is
Hi,
Pippi.
Sherry. Hi, Pippi.
Hey, it's Susan.
Hi, Susan.
Hi. What would you like me to do today?
Help me with the chat box.
Okay.
And if you can post, I would go ahead and post website information, but if I do that now, people who come in later won't be able to see that in the chat box. So it'd be better to do it once we get rolling. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so what I tell them in the intro, I tell them about here, I tell you what, I will text you the all of them. How about that? Then you'll just have them.
That would be
Yeah, that would be easier. And it's got some of the content too, but you'll figure it out. But don't send them until we're starting, because again, you dismiss them.
Okie dokie.
I kind of wish the chat was historic, if you will. So if you came, if you got kicked out or something and you come back in, that you could at least see what had been going on while you were
Yeah.
fumbling around with your computer, but it doesn't work that way. Or it doesn't for me. Maybe it's a me thing.
No, it doesn't do it for me either.
Okay.
Hello, Barry.
Hi, how are you doing tonight?
Good. How are you?
I just enjoyed a lovely grilled cheese tomato sandwich with one of the tomatoes from your seedlings, which are doing very good for me. Thank you.
Oh, excellent.
And we've
I
had
picked my
zucchini
first
bread.
tomatoes today.
Oh, I've picked probably about a half dozen, and we've had zucchini bread and zucchini muffins. SBK's given me very good seedlings this year.
Awesome. That's awesome.
I have a watermelon. I'm going to go out and pick it after we're done here.
Oh,
Seriously?
wow.
Yeah.
We have a tiny one, but it's nowhere near ready to be picked yet.
Yeah, that's really early, Susan.
It's a sweet melon. It's a individual one, but yeah, it's ready.
Awesome.
Yeah,
So-
my neighbor told me she had a big watermelon she wanted to bring me. I'm like, oh God, I don't want a big watermelon. They're so huge. I can't eat all that.
So
But it's nice to have nice neighbors.
yes, it is. I haven't gotten, well, my tomatoes are still green because I got them in later. So I'm glad you guys have some. That gives me hope.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I was telling my mom because she's not having luck over in Tennessee at all, which I told her, I said, Mom, it's because you've been using the same soil for I don't know how long, and you need to put some new soil in. But I have probably 3 dozen, then all shades of green to red out there right now. So they're doing really well.
Excellent.
Yeah, I lost a few because I was gone for a week. They just they were little. My first ones are usually really small, and most of them will have blossom end rot, and I just throw them out there for the
Yeah,
deer,
we've
whoever.
had to throw away a bunch of ones that had blossom end rot on it as well. The early ones did. So but now they seem to be coming in really good. So.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
they're beautiful, huge.
Yeah, my first ones did too. So as soon as I saw it, I threw Epsom salts in there. So
No,
Yep.
I was thinking I didn't do anything but pull them off the vine and say, ah. Oh well.
Yeah, my mom calls me constantly with all kinds of tips. I'm like, Mom, I'm telling you now, you can look something up and it's so confusing because, wilted leaves could mean it's underwatered or overwatered. You can never tell which way it is. I said, in my garden, they either grow or they go in the compost pile. That's what happens in my garden.
Yeah. Yes.
I
Agreed.
Debbie was kind enough to let me take some of the leaf mulch, or not the leaf mulch, the mulch from the teaching garden pile to start one of my gardens off, and everything in there is doing really well.
My dad would tell you that's absolutely the way to go. I
Yeah.
don't even fertilize stuff in his garden. We're on year 2 of the leaf mulch garden. I mean, that had I don't fertilizer in it. I don't need to. I'm afraid if I did, the plants would go absolutely crazy.
Your good luck would go away.
Yeah. We will have to eventually, but not yet. I've got about 5 more minutes and we'll get started. Mary says she doesn't have many slides. She's got lots of time for questions, so that'll be nice. We'll have a little chit chat.
Awesome.
I think our last couple of Successful Gardeners shows, whatever, events have been, well, I think, was it last time that it was an hour and a half, but it was insects.
There's a lot of bugs in the world.
A lot of bugs. And even then he said, I just like very top of the, tip of the iceberg there.
Definitely. Definitely.
We also had a lot of people sign up for this one, so that's awesome. It was like 57, the last time I looked, 57 people signed up for it. Yeah.
Probably I wonder if the board meeting is running.
No idea. One of the reasons we record it.
There you go.
Welder's the only one who hasn't eaten.
Oh, Susan shared the other thing you can help me with is muting people. Sometimes when they come in, they're automatically muted, and sometimes they aren't. And I'm never. Sometimes, one time I muted everybody, including the speaker who was speaking at the time. Not good.
I've wanted to do that a couple of times.
I don't think I logged in the right way to do that. I don't think I can mute people.
No, I think it looks like there's 2 people that are logged in as UCMG website.
Yeah,
So
I
no
can do
worries,
that.
don't worry about it.
Because I'm on my laptop now, and I everything I had to try to figure out how to get back into everything. So.
Oh, did you post all of that, Susan?
Did I not have?
No. You just needed to post the URLs.
Okay.
You'll need to post them again after we get started, though,
Right.
because people who come in after that, they won't see it.
Okay. But I like
No
what you wrote, so that's why I put it all in there.
Well, I'm just gonna say it here in a minute with some other stuff. See, for those of you who are with us waiting, Susan just posted a couple of websites that you might want to keep.
Snicker.
So who was outside gardening today? And you survived?
I won't say gardening. I will say just looking at my plants because I'm worried about them wilting because today it said 94, but 108 with the heat index.
I can attest
So
to that.
some of them looking fine and some of them looking fragile. And I'm not sure
Fragile.
what to do.
Well, that is why you're here, and Mary's going to help you.
Exactly.
I like that word fragile. That's a very interesting choice of words. I hadn't really thought about it that way, but you're absolutely right.
Yeah,
I
but
was
the
feeling fragile
stem is
myself.
kind of laying over, and I know it's gotten more than enough water from
Yeah.
the storm. And it's
Yeah.
getting ready to storm now, so I'm hearing it.
Yeah. Thank goodness there's at least been rain. Can you imagine this kind of
Right.
weather and no rain? Be even worse. Yeah, let's look at it. Yeah, it says, oh, we're down to 89, but it feels like 99.
Right, right.
Oh my goodness.
Monday's supposed to be cooler, 80.
Monday,
Mm,
Sunday too, I think.
yeah, Sunday and Monday. So right now, pretty much all I'm doing is watering and harvesting
Oh,
and pulling the occasional
Victoria
leaf.
says there's a password for this.
July is the password. I didn't have to use it, but that's the password if you log in a different way.
Yeah, it is amazing to me how many different ways you can get here. Yeah. And so it looks like she needs a password.
Who is it?
Dora, do you have her email address? I mean, her text number?
I
'Cause
don't.
I might, I probably can't add her. Okay, I'm going to send that to you, Susan,
Thank you.
so you can help her out.
Okay. I'm just on my iPad tonight. My computer is
Everybody's having computer problems.
sad. It's very sad.
Okay, I just sent that to you, Susan.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get this show on the road. Okay. Good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us for the July Successful Gardener class. We are recording the class, so please mute your line during the presentation. My name is Christina Culp. I'm one of the Union County Extension Master Gardeners. And we host the Successful Gardener series at 7 o'clock on the first Thursday of every month except December. Next month, Todd with the Roots Farm in, I guess it's Waxhaw or Marvin. It's down the street from me, so I'm not really sure. Will talk with us about starting a fall garden. And one of the things I've learned the hard way is that I always wait too late. So August is not too late to start talking about, not too early to start talking about a fall garden. So we are really fortunate to be able to grow edibles all the time here. Pretty much you can have some kind of food crop in the ground all year round. So we'll talk about seed starting, transplanting, and care, and fall cleanup next month. Make sure to register on our website, and Susan will put that URL in the chat box. And for the full Successful Gardener calendar, you can also go to our website, and that's Master Gardeners Union County NC.org/successful-gardener. I know that's a lot, but she'll put both of those in the chat box. We will add links to the chat box that our video links to the. Oh, I'm sorry. We're going to add this to the chat box. Our website also has a lot of good information for you, from information about our programs, not just the Successful Gardener, but our newsletters and Ask a Master Gardener events that we do, upcoming events, gardening information, and especially important, I think anyway, is how you might want to become a master gardener. You don't have to be an expert to be a master gardener. We actually do the training for you. So you will be, well, you can ask Sherry. She still says she's not an expert and she's gone through the training. So it's debatable, I guess. But there's lots more information here about that. And that's also on our website under Become a Master Gardener. Tonight, Mary Roberts, who is the owner of Windcrest Farms, is with us. She owns and operates Windcrest Farm with her partner, Ray Tarleton, and they produce more than 250,000 heirloom vegetable, flower, and herb plants every year, which is really stunning. I guess I wonder who counted them. That sounds like no fun at all. And they offer sustainable agricultural classes as well to the public. Tonight, though, very appropriately with the weather, she is going to talk to us about ways that we can manage our gardens in this summer heat. I told her that it looked like Mother Nature had done some marketing for her. I don't think we could have done much better, worse on the weather for this class. It's no surprise that it's hot. Any of you that have lived here at least one summer know that it's going to happen every single year like this. This year we got kind of walloped with it early in the season. So we might as well figure out how to help our plants be as happy as possible and survive this inferno is what I wrote in my notes. It does kind of feel like that today. Please add your questions to the chat box and we'll field those toward the end of the hour. Mary says she's only got a few slides and is hoping that we'll have lots of questions. So hold on to those and we will get to all of them, or try to anyway. The recorded program will be available on our YouTube channel, and that will also be on our website. So if the same place that you went to register for this, the the Successful Gardener calendar has all of the links to the YouTube channel, and we'll post it on our Facebook page too. Mary, I'm sure with all the time that you have been at Windcrest Farm that you've had your share of hot summer weather. So I'm hoping that you can enlighten us about how we can survive this rough patch, hot patch, whatever you want to call it. So I'll give it to you now.
Well, thank you very much. And I appreciate the invitation again to speak to everyone through the Successful Gardener program. In way of introduction, Windcrest Farm has been operating commercially for 18 years, but I've been on this property in Union County for 44. So yeah, I've seen a summer or two on this. Let me make sure I can advance these slides before we go further. There we go. All right, that is a picture of me a couple of years ago. COVID has changed a lot of things since then, but there it is. As I said, we established Windcrest Farm in 1978, 44 years ago. And before starting farming, I was an avid gardener, turning pro. And prior to that, I was in tech and project management. For 16 years, we were at the Matthews Farmers Market, and I know many of you from there. And you know, when COVID happened, we brought all of that to the farm, and we now have a on-farm garden center and farm shop where we do help farmers, market farmers, and gardeners with their vegetable, herb, flower, and fruit plants for their gardens. And as you mentioned before, we do have classes. We also do produce, so we've earned our living trying to keep gardens alive during the summer. So I'm hoping to share some of that experience with you here tonight. So the things that I'm going to cover in this session, and including your questions, is what we can do to help our gardens survive and even thrive during the hottest days of summer. And that will include when is the best time to water, how much we should water, what are the signs of stress. And suddenly I've lost my
Hold on just a second.
presentation.
Yeah, someone has shared their screen. There we go. I think you can go back and try to share now. Sorry about that. It's easy enough for anybody to share their screen, unfortunately. Can you try to go back in and redo it?
Yes, I said share. And
You're going to be an expert by the time this is over.
there we go.
There you go.
Okay.
Thanks.
And so what are the signs and what are the remedies for heat stress? We're going to talk about that for both the garden and the gardener. Does mulching help? What other techniques can we use? And what about all the weeds? Because from now until August, they seem to be thriving and reproducing faster than we can keep on top of them, even in a drought and in the heat. So we'll be touching on some of those subjects. But first, we really need to take care of the gardener. If you're not thriving, neither is your garden. Because you'll be less likely to go out and look for the signs on a daily basis as to what's going on with your garden. You'll be less enthusiastic about doing it again next year, having gone through one of these. So some of the things that I personally do as a strategy is I look at my work hours. I am outside at 6 o'clock in the morning, enjoying the sunrise and the bird song. And then by 10 o'clock, depending on what the weather is like, maybe I can stretch it till 12, but I'm in the house for the afternoon to do some paperwork or do some crafts or whatever. But then when the sun starts to go down, actually the humidity does go down. And it's more the humidity that wears me out than the heat. So I kind of divide my gardening days into two sections. I go out in the morning, I make sure that I water, looking for anything that needs to be taken care of immediately, and then maybe making some plans for my afternoon or evening hours. Work clothes, I'd like to keep it loose and airy, and remember to wear that hat. Sunscreen, I'm not a fan of sunscreen, but I am a fan of a hat and covering up, and you'd be surprised at how much cooler that will keep you than trying to be minimally dressed. That's what I found in my opinion. Water, water, water. We're going to talk a lot about that for plants, and we all know this. We've heard this, stay hydrated. It's so important. And sometimes we get so involved with what we're doing in the garden that we forget to have some water. But I find that in this kind of heat, working about 45, 50 minutes, stopping, getting a bit of shade, getting some water, admiring the work you've gotten done, that's important. A lot of times we're just working right along and don't take time to enjoy the fruits of our labor, so to speak. So build those rest periods into your gardening work session so that you can last longer and just enjoy exactly what you're doing. Now, how the heat and the humidity affects plants, it's going to depend on the plant as to what kind of effect that the heat and humidity are going to, how it's going to present itself as a stress. All of us think of wilting as a stress, but in a lot of ways, wilting is self-preservation for the plant. So maybe we've gone out and we've watered, or we've had one of these nice evening natural rain events, and we're sure there's enough water, but we come out in the afternoon and we see that plants are wilted. It doesn't necessarily mean that it needs water, but that it is, the air temperature is so high that it's trying to keep itself from losing moisture from that drying effect. So if you're certain that you've got enough moisture, we'll just look at that wilting as a self-preservation. The next morning, if that plant is upright and not wilted, you'll know that just was, a heat index of 108. We're all going to wilt, no matter how much water that we've had. So keep an eye on that. I'll mention a little later that wilting is not only a sign of drought, but wilting can be a sign of overwatering. And we'll touch on that in a little bit. So of course, the heat and humidity affect how the water is taken up, not only through the roots, but through the leaf stoma. So we know that on the underside of leaves, there's small openings that exchange water in and out. So when it gets very hot, those leaf stoma close up so that it's not expiring any water, and may also be a sign through wilting that that's happening. So we want to also think about the water uptake in the heat and humidity, causing things like blossom end rot in tomatoes and peppers. Now, a lot of people talk about there not being adequate calcium in the soil, giving us a blossom end rot. But actually, not having enough calcium is a little more rare than not having enough water to carry the calcium. So inconsistent watering can be as much of an effect of causing a blossom end rot as the lack of calcium. So we're going to talk a lot about water. The other way that heat and humidity can affect plants is in its pollination. And I'm going to use tomatoes as an example throughout this presentation, simply because it is the #1 vegetable that folks grow in their garden. It's the one that's most talked about as far as problems. And it's a good example of all of the mechanisms that happen with heat and humidity. So with high humidity in particular, it makes pollen sticky and it's less likely to dissipate. So we know that pollen needs to travel, whether mechanically through our pollinating insects or from the wind, or even from us manually shaking a plant or using a paintbrush to dissipate the pollen. If we've got high humidity, that pollen is sticky and not as airy and able to do its job. The high heat, especially at night, can cause blossom drop in tomatoes and lots of other fruits and vegetables, and cause slow maturing fruit. So right now, everybody's waiting for their green tomatoes to turn red. Why aren't they maturing? Well, it's not only the high daytime temperatures, but the high nighttime temperatures. So when we see the nighttime temperatures start to come down, all of a sudden, all of these tomatoes are going to start to ripen. Now, blossom drop can happen not just because it's hot and humid and that plant is trying to conserve its energy, but because there has not been any pollination. An unpollinated flower will drop. So if you've gone out and seen lots of flowers and then you come back and there's no fruit, it may be not just a heat and humidity problem, but could be a pollination problem. So something else to look out for. So as we're planning our gardens, we want to, for this area particularly, choose heat-loving and heat-resistant varieties. So heat-loving varieties, of course, are tomatoes, basil, peppers, eggplant. The thing that we see most often in the springtime is gardeners just so ready to get those basil plants out in the garden. Well, basil doesn't want a nighttime temperature below 55. They just will not thrive. And so here we have, excuse me, here we have plants that are waiting for this hot weather, particularly the peppers. We all know when peppers really start to get in gear, and that is at the end of the summer in August. They like those long, hot days in order to really produce. Now, varieties that don't love the heat, such as lettuce and broccoli, there's now a lot of breeding going on to get heat-resistant lettuce and broccoli, those things that will be slow to bolt once we get the warmer weather. We're getting in that transition between spring and summer. So if you are gardening 3 to 4 seasons out of the year in the Piedmont, looking for those heat-resistant varieties that are bred for our climate is a good strategy when you're starting out. Now, the things that don't even try to plant during the middle of the summer, it's just frustrating. The heat-hating varieties, things like dill and cilantro. I think in my 18 years of talking with gardeners through Windcrest Farm, the most asked question that I have gotten is, why can't I grow cilantro in the summer? Well, that's because cilantro does not like the heat at all. Dill is the same way, but these two varieties, what we do want to do is perhaps succession plant them, particularly in the early spring and in the fall, and in the heat of the summer. If you have preserved some of these in the freezer, you can add them to your pickles or your salsa, and it'll be just like fresh. But don't frustrate yourself trying to plant dill and cilantro this time of year. There's just some things that you just need to take a rest from during the summer. Now, we want to make sure, particularly as we're coming into a changing of the seasons, the fall planting, which I understand is the next session of Successful Gardener. We want to make sure that we're hardening off any seedlings before planting. Now, a lot of people think about this in the spring because we're going from maybe a warm seed starting area, greenhouse, or maybe you're starting your seeds inside. And we talk a lot about hardening off seedlings to go from the warm into the cold. But it actually works the opposite way also. If you're going to be starting your lettuces and kales, collards, broccoli, those kinds of things for the fall garden, and you've started them, if you're lucky, in a cooler environment, because it is a challenge to start them this time of year for fall planting. But if you're starting them in a cooler environment, you do have to harden them off into the heat. So it works the opposite way also. You just can't take something that you have really cared for with indoor seeding and then put it out in the summer heat. It won't work. If you are direct sowing, so in August, typically we start sowing our carrot seeds so that they've had time to mature before the average first frost date in October. If you're direct sowing those things, it's really going to be important to keep that soil moist in order to get good germination. One of the tactics you can use is once you have seeded and covered your seed with the soil, you can cover where you've sown with newspaper, wet newspaper or burlap, and that's going to help shade, hold in moisture, cool the soil, and speed up germination. And you'll need to check it every day, because once it germinates, you'll want to remove those things. But these are tactics that we can use to go ahead and garden cool season things in the heat of the summer. So when we're talking about the temperature, and we all in the last couple of days have been looking at that, what they call real feel. Yes, the thermometer may say it's 99, but it feels like 108. But there's lots of other things to think about with temperature. And the two things are not only the air temperature, but the soil temperature. So just like tomatoes won't ripen when the nighttime temperatures are high, if the soil temperature gets above 90 degrees, it will also slow the plant down, not only in growing, but maturing the fruit. It's also a reason, high summer soil temperatures, that carrots, root crops like carrots, always taste better in a cooler soil in the fall and in the spring than if you sow them in the spring and you're harvesting them in the middle of the summer. So one of our signature crops is ginger and turmeric. And ginger well, ginger and turmeric both are tropical plants, so they like the heat. But once the soil temperature gets around 90 degrees, they absolutely come to a standstill. And so we will lower the temperature or try to keep the temperature of the soil below 90 degrees through mulching, through shading, and through watering. We water off of a well, and that water is nice and cool. So I am timing that watering not just to hydrate the plant, but also to cool the soil temperature. So whereas there's different watering strategies I'm going to talk about in just a minute, one of the things that we can do is water to lower that soil temperature. Now, the air temperature, of course, we're all watching that, and it's that combination of the humidity and the air temperature that has more of a detriment to us as gardeners than to our plants, but something that we can keep an eye on. So, water. We'll talk about the what, when, why, and how of watering. Know that all of your plants do not necessarily need the same amount of water. So as a gardener, you should be aware of what the watering needs of a certain plant are. One of the passions that I have is lavender plants. I'm now up to 25 different varieties. If you're looking for lavender, come see me. I can talk about them all day. But those lavender plants, being from the Mediterranean, like it dry. And so whereas I might be watering my tomato plants every day or even twice a day, the lavender plants might get watered once a week, depending on the rain. I won't water any of my lavender that's outside probably for another week or so, even with these temperatures, because we've had some rain. So the sure way to kill lavender is overwatering it or having it sit in water. And then, of course, things like succulents, I rarely water them at all. But not everything needs the same amount of water, so be educated on that. Watering in the morning is ideal because it prepares the plants for that afternoon heat. And like I said previously, if you have watered in the morning, you're sure that they've been hydrated and you see some wilting in the afternoon, it may just be a self-preservation of that plant. If they're fully hydrated the next morning, I would say to myself, I don't need to water these again until I see some kind of need for it. Now, some of our container plants, we water both in the morning and then in the late afternoon because they can't reach out to the depths to access water reservoirs like our plants in the ground. So this time of year, yes, you may have to water again in the late afternoon. We've talked about why we're doing that. We're reducing the plant stress, and we're also reducing the soil temperatures, which is as important as the air temperatures. We always want to water the roots, not the plant. When we water the plant and it has that moisture sitting on it, it's an invitation for disease. So blights that we're seeing now in tomatoes, any kind of virus, they're in the air and they're just looking for that nice hydrated area to set up and attach itself to the plant. So I had to educate my husband on this. He thought he was really doing a great thing to give the plants a shower because they looked like they were hot. And I'm like, you can do that for you, or you can do that for the dogs, but not for the plants. That's not a good thing for the plants. So water the root, not the plant. Now, all this increased watering means we need to increase feeding. even with regular watering this time of year, your plants have put in a lot of energy to vegetative growth. So lots of leaves and heights and roots. It's put a lot of effort into flowers and fruit. So any fertilization that you may have done in the spring may need to be repeated at this time. And particularly in, again, raised beds and containers, you've watered a lot. Some of these fertilizers are water soluble so that they are leaching away as well as they've been used up by the plant. So just keep in mind that if you go out and you look at your plants and they're looking a little pale or not as robust as they did in the spring, it may not be the heat and humidity. It may be that they're hungry. So look at your feeding regimen and think about now is the time to give your plants a little bit of extra boost to get them on through until frost, which is, 3 months away. We still have a long time to go. Now, we use a lot of compost teas here because that way I can water and feed at the same time. So we have a class on compost teas, so I'll invite you to look us up for that. But it's kind of a one-shot deal. I can get everything done at once. And when you have as many plants here as we do, we need to combine tasks as much as possible. Now, there is an urban legend or a rural legend, or however you want to put it, that if you withhold water, it will concentrate the flavors, particularly in tomatoes. And that's simply not true. That has been proven that you're not concentrating any flavors at all. Don't withhold water because you think you're going to get a tastier tomato. We want to keep that plant thriving and producing the natural sugars that it needs to make our vegetables really not taste watered down, so to speak. Uneven watering will cause malformed fruit and cracking. So malformed fruit, if you're growing squash or cucumbers, sometimes you'll see a cucumber that looks like it has a pinched end, or a squash that seems to be mushy on one end. That's uneven watering. That could also be a sign of incomplete pollination, but a lot of times it's uneven watering. So consistency in watering will help you get a prettier fruit. Cracking tomatoes, that happens when they've gotten a lot of water all at once and they weren't used to it. So to prevent cracking of tomatoes, and I will put a little footnote there, some varieties, particularly in the heirlooms, are more susceptible to cracking than others. But uneven watering can cause that even in the most uniform hybrid tomato that's out there. Now, if you've got heavy Carolina clay, you need to determine when you see wilting plants, whether your plants are dehydrated or they're drowning. So if you've got a soil that really holds on to water, wilting can be a sign that there's not enough oxygen in the soil and the plant is actually drowning. So know your soil. In the end, it all really comes down to soil. So modify your watering, based on what kind of soil that you're dealing with. Now, I always like to use the phrase, you water a lot, a little, not a little, a lot. So I have lots of people who are so passionate about their gardens and they look forward to ending their day with a visit to the garden and just giving everything a little bit of water every day. The thing is with that is that you're training those roots to sit at the top of the soil and wait for you to come and give it a little bit of water every day. And then when you go on vacation, or you're not able to get out there, or you have somebody come else and water, and they are not watering the same way as you are, then you've got problems. If you've trained those roots to be right at the top of the soil and you're not there to water them, they're going to wilt. They're going to suffer. So I am a big fan of deep watering. I want to water a lot. I want that water to go way down into the soil. So if I'm delayed in watering, or we have a heat wave like we've had, those plants can have a reservoir to call upon. They can reach down. You're encouraging those roots to go as deep as possible. And that's what plant roots are designed to do, is go very deep. And hopefully, we don't have a hard pan or something that's going to restrict those roots so that they can reach down. If you want to see something interesting there are quite a few illustrations that were done, I think in the early 1900s, that show how deep roots go. And they go several feet down into the soil. So let's put some water down there so that the plants can access those and all the minerals that are naturally occurring in our soil. Mulch is another strategy we can use to conserve water, cool the soil, and of course, keep our weed pressure down, and actually feed the soil and build a good topsoil. So once your seedlings or your transplants are 7 to 8 inches tall, we want to apply a 4 to 6 inch blanket of mulch to cover the soil surrounding the plant and the bed and aisleways too. The more you can keep soil covered, the better. Nature will cover the soil if you don't, and usually she does it with weeds. So mulching is a good strategy. Mulch stays on top of the soil. You're not incorporating it into the soil. There are a lot of folks that'll say, oh, you need to be careful about this mulch or that mulch because it will rob your soil of nitrogen as it starts to decompose. And that is true if you're mixing it into the soil. But if you're laying it right on top, there's really a buffer there. You're going to have all your microbes working on that mulch, decomposing it, and they're not going to be doing that from around your plant. Using mulch conserves water because it reduces the surface evaporation. Now, there is some surface evaporation that's going to happen naturally. I mean, it's just going to happen. If you're using drip, which we use a lot of drip here because it conserves water, but it also keeps our soil surface dry and it suppresses some disease and suppresses weeds. Those weed seeds aren't germinating on the top of the soil. So, but that's where you need to go in with your finger and test and see just where that water starts. So if it looks dry on the top, but if you're using drip, it's going to look dry on the top. If you're watering with a hose or a watering can or something like that, you still could look like you have a dry surface, but dig down in there about an inch and see what you're working with down below, so you don't fall into that trap of drowning your plants. Like I said, mulch suppresses weeds, always a good thing for us gardeners. Now, you can use landscape cloth, plastic sheeting. However, if you do that, and there's a place for this, you will prevent any of the mulch from gradually decomposing into a layer of topsoil and adding some nutrients and nourishing your soil. So if you're going to go with landscape cloth or plastic sheeting, I'm sorry, let me back up. If you're going to go with a natural mulch, don't put anything underneath it unless you're using something that will decompose, such as cardboard or newspaper. And I'll talk about that in just a moment. Any of our mulch is going to, other than synthetic mulch, is going to start to decompose, which is a good thing. But to suppress weeds and to keep that water conservation, you may need to go out and top it off throughout the season to maintain that 4 to 6 inch blanket. So here's some of the mulch materials that we can use. One is straw, and let's make sure that it is straw and not hay. Straw is what is left over after a grain harvest, so they've taken off the seed head. Hay is something that will contain a lot of seed. So that seed a lot of times means weeds. I will tell you personal experience, we grew a cover crop for the first time in our high tunnels of winter rye, which is a grain crop. But with the busy spring, we didn't get around to cutting it in time. It set seed. By the time that I cut it, I had a lot of rye seed all through the beds. Rye is a fantastic crop as a cover crop because it's very deep rooted. It opens up the soil, it brings up sub minerals. It's fantastic, but not when it's in your growing beds when you don't want it there. So something that's beneficial became a weed for us. We've taken care of that and learned a lesson. But here make sure you're getting straw and not hay in order to keep those weed seeds out of your garden bed. Alfalfa hay, as well as alfalfa meal or cubes, is an excellent mulching material. We use alfalfa meal a lot. Very high in nitrogen. It's long lasting. We soak the alfalfa meal. You would want to soak the hay also, so that it stays in place and it starts that release of the nitrogen. Alfalfa hay is pricey, but it's an excellent amendment as well as a mulch to our soils. The most readily resource that you have as a gardener would be leaves and grass clippings. For many years, we have used leaves from Union County as a mulch, and we are located halfway in between downtown Monroe and downtown Pageland on a road called Sandy Ridge, and our soil is sandy. We are not battling the North Carolina clay. We've got some South Carolina sand on our soil. And so mulching with the leaves not only helped to retain the moisture in the soil, but it has enriched our soil to give us that really nice, rich, black couple of inches of topsoil all through the decomposition of leaves. Now, whole leaves can blow away. They've got a lot of surface area. So it's best to shred or chop the leaves so that they stay in place. And you can do that with a lawnmower. Leaves are usually readily available either in your yard or your lovely neighbors are putting them in black plastic bags and ready for you to pick up at the curb. It's easy to just take those and crunch them up or let them decompose for a while and use them as a mulch. Grass clippings work well too. If they are fresh and green, they're going to have high nitrogen in them, but the fresh will pack down and heat up. So you need to be aware of that. For years, I would take all of the grass clippings for mowing and put it around trees and bushes, not up against the trunk. You need to pull them away a little bit. But that heat actually would kill any of the weeds. It would burn them out and nourish the soil with some nitrogen. So free stuff right in your yard that you can use to help your soil and help you as a gardener not have to weed so much. Now, bark mulch is commonly used in shrubs and landscaping. we use it for paths between the vegetable beds. We will also put it in the bottom of containers, but we don't mix it in with our soil. It can be acidic. So we just want to be a little careful about any bark mulch. Now, there is a style of gardening called Back to Eden that is putting a lot of wood chips down as a mulch. That's a little bit different. And if that is something that you're interested in, there's lots of information and some videos on YouTube about that. Wood and leaves are home for lots of beneficial fungi that we want in our gardening beds. So there is a place for it, but just do a little homework before you put a lot of the particularly pine bark around your vegetable beds. Now, if you're lucky enough to live by the ocean or take a beach trip and you see some seaweed, it makes an ideal mulch. I just put this in here because there are some folks that do garden at the beach. Little known fact for most folks, seaweed deters slugs, which is an issue here well, in any garden, particularly with now you're watering a lot, slugs like the water. So seaweed. Just make sure that if you're using any seaweed, you wash it very well, rinse it off in case there's any saltwater residue in it. And you'll need to apply it thickly because as it dries, it will shrink and leave gaps. One of the things that we use a lot of here, particularly in the last 2 years with so many Amazon packages coming to the farm, is newspaper and cardboard. Now, this is one material you can use to give some extra protection, a little extra barrier against weeds underneath some of your other natural mulches. So putting down cardboard and then putting your chopped up leaves on top of that just gives you a double barrier, and it works really well. We have it last 2 to 3 seasons in some of our flower beds of keeping the weeds down. You're going to make sure that if you're going to use newspaper or cardboard, that it is not glossy. Glossy inks we do not want in our soils, but most other inks are soy-based inks. If you have an allergy to soy products or whatever, we are allowed to use it in organic production, so there's no restrictions on that. It does take a while to remove all that packing tape and the plastic, packing slip labels and all of that, but it's well worth it, and it's a very low cost, free resource, and it's not pretty, but that's why we put the leaf mulch on top of it. You never see it. There is a place for plastic covers, and there's 3 kind of categories. There's black plastic sheeting, which is a short-term use. There's a lot of disposal issues with that. We do not use black plastic sheeting. It does not allow the soil to breathe. And with organic regulations, it must be removed at the end of each season. So there's lots of labor involved. Woven ground cover is something a little different. Yes, it is black plastic, but it's porous and it will let water and air exchange. And it will last. I have some of the woven ground cover that we started using 18 years ago, and I'm still using it. So it's an investment that we keep using. And then there's a woven landscape fabric. Landscape fabric, I have seen just kind of nightmares where plants have grown into it from the top, and then it's hard to get out, and then it shreds. And my personal experience, I have not used it, but I've seen it. I've been warned against it, so I'll pass that on to you. Just know that things will grow into landscape fabric, including weeds. Now, compost is regularly used as a mulch, and it's great, but make sure that it's well-aged compost. If you can see what the components of that compost, such as a banana peel or an onion skin or something, you can see what made that, what is gone into that compost, then that compost is not well aged. It's not ready. It's still being digested by the microbes that should be working to feed your plants instead of feeding on the compost. So make sure that it's well aged. It needs to be applied thickly in order to suppress weeds and to retain the moisture. You shouldn't use fresh manure that has not been composted. You're going to get a lot of weed seeds. That composting helps heat up and destroy any weed seeds that are in there. It also, you could have some pathogens in there that you'd rather not have your vegetable plants uptake. So stay away from manures and go with the well-aged compost. So let's talk about shade. Our plants can actually still produce the gardens we want with 30 to 50% shade. And we need to consider what we call full sun and consider the day length. So as of today, July the 7th, there are 14 hours between sunrise and sunset, when our fruiting plants really need 6 to 8 hours of direct sunlight to be considered to be in full sun. So we can provide some relief to both ourselves as gardeners and our plants by providing some shade. We have 7 grow houses here. Some of them are greenhouses and some of them are high tunnels. They all have a shade cloth on them. Some are 30%, some are 50%, but we get plenty of sun to get plenty of a crop with providing some shade. So the ideal sunlight, direct sunlight that you get is in the morning. So that's the time when our plants are less stressed. They have recovered from any stress from the previous afternoon. They've probably rehydrated themselves from the morning of watering. And so they get that good sunlight and make that chlorophyll and pump those sugars into the fruit. So if you can plan for morning sun, 6 to 8 hours, then that's best. So how do we provide some of that shade? Well, when we're planting our garden, we can take that into account. For instance, my blueberry orchard actually does not get sun until 10 o'clock in the morning. That way I can get out and harvest in the shade before the sun comes up and I'm wilting along with the plants. So knowing which direction your garden is oriented, where your morning sun is, goes a long way. We can interplant in order to provide some shade. So perhaps we're out in a field or in our backyard or on a patio, and we don't have some structure that we can use, but we can use plants. So I might plant some corn or okra. Okra is a tall plant. And put that on the side of the shorter plants that will provide some shade in the afternoon. So using your garden to companion or interplant, that comes in handy too as we're coming into fall. We can start our fall plants underneath the taller plants. We regularly start to plant lettuce underneath the tomato plants because they're providing some extra shade. And those shorter plants also are a living mulch. So as much as that garden bed is covered, it's providing that cooling effect. Trellises, if you have a trellis, you can trellis up your cucumbers. That could be a taller plant that you can put on the south side of your south or west side of other plants to provide some shade. And then there is shade cloth. You can get flexible hoops and throw some shade cloth over that. Even some of the insect netting can provide some shade as well as protection from what we're going to see the cabbage moths start pretty soon laying their eggs on plants. If you've got something covering your plants, it's providing some relief from the sun with shade, but also a barrier to insects. And so the other thing that we want to talk about, that we've talked about, but want to focus on here is humidity and airflow. So the water in the air is as much of a concern for us as the water in the soil. And humidity can just really set us up for some diseases. So we want to make sure that we have some good airflow. The way that we can do that is through trellising. So all of our cucumbers are trellised up so that we're reducing that incidence of powdery mildew or some of the like the mosaic virus. Air is the enemy to bacterial diseases. So doing trellising not only helps the plant, but it helps me as the farmer. I'm not crawling around trying to find cucumbers that have gotten as big as a baseball bat because they weren't hanging right in front of my face. So we love to do as much stuff vertically as possible. Pruning, also, we do a lot of pruning on our cucumbers and our tomatoes. Any leaves that are below a fruit set on a tomato, we snap those right off. By the end of the season, we have probably a 4 or 5 foot stem, almost looks like a rope of tomato vine that we've removed all the leaves from. What that's doing is that's providing airflow underneath the plant. It's removing any leaves that really aren't serving the purpose of maturing the fruit. We also do that with our cucumber plants. So the pruning provides that increased airflow. It takes off any foliage that's really not benefiting the plant at all, and reduces that spread of any potential diseases. So I hope that that's giving you some strategies and maybe some new ways of looking at your plants while we're in the heat of the summer, and observing some of the things that the plants are doing in order to try to cope with this heat. If you have, any questions, we can take those now. My information, my contact information is here on screen, and I hope that you'll look us up. We will have fall plants ready at the end of August, 1st of September. And I hope you'll come out and see our operation. We have, like I said, we have 7 houses. Our big event is in the fall with the harvest of the ginger and turmeric. And we also have a little farm shop now with lots of fun stuff for gardeners.
Well, that is wonderful. And how timely that our next session will be about starting the fall garden, and then they can come run over there and buy some plants, right?
Yes, please.
Yes, please. And we have lots of questions. I believe you probably answered this one, but this might have come in before you talked about it, but I'll go ahead and make sure. I'll start from the beginning. Does high humidity cause pollen to be clumpy and cause issues with potential pollination? And I believe
Yes, absolutely. Even if we've got good pollinators, they can't always pick up that pollen to distribute it to other plants. You can help if you want to hand pollinate. Things like tomatoes actually are pollinated more by the wind or vibration. So in greenhouse production of tomatoes, they actually have an instrument, a wand, that acts kind of like your electronic toothbrush, right? It's a vibration. And they'll just go up to a tomato plant and touch the stem and vibrate that. And you can see puffs of pollen go disperse and pollinate flowers around it. It's really kind of amazing. And that naturally happens when we go in and we, maybe sucker the tomatoes or we're trellising it up, we're releasing that pollen. But in high humidities, that isn't happening. It's clumping up. So if you're seeing a lot of flowers and then you're seeing a lot of blossoms drop, that means that that flower was not pollinated. Once it pollinates, you're good to go. The job has been done. But if that flower is not pollinated, that plant says, well, not going to reproduce through this tomato. I'm going to drop that one and go to the next. So, yes. But
What you mentioned about fertilizing more often if you're watering more often. So can you give them some ideas about frequency on that?
well,
I'm sure it's plant dependent.
it is plant dependent, and it is dependent on what type of fertilization that you have done. So, for instance, we fertilize with a product that we make here on farm called Compost Complete with Mary's Mineral Mix. And what is in that is vermicompost and lots of minerals. Those minerals do not leach away. They bind to the soil acids. They're not water soluble. They're soil acid soluble. And we put the vermicompost in there to help that along. It's just like with you and I, we don't personally digest our own food. It's our gut bacteria that digests our food and feeds it to us. It's the same with the plant roots. So we need that good biology in there to digest the minerals and feed it to the plant. So it's slow release, long acting. So I may not have to fertilize it often as someone who's using a synthetics. I'll name names like a Miracle Grow. That is a water soluble. That's a Red Bull. Okay, it's not a 5-course meal. So it's going to be there. The plant takes it up, and then it's gone, and then the plant goes, okay, well, where's my next Red Bull? So what we do is we do a heavy fertilization at the time of planting, but then we do a liquid feed once a month with a compost tea, fish hydrolysate, just to kind of keep those microbes going and provide a little extra nutrition along the way. So we've had our big meal, and now we're just kind of having that snack along the way. But I would say if, and your plant is going to tell you if it lacks vigor, if it looks hungry, if it looked nice and green, and now it's kind of pale, it's missing something.
All right. So someone asked, we were talking about tomatoes cracking, and that's most often caused by a lot of water, like we're getting right now at my house anyway. And what about horizontal cracks versus vertical cracks? Are those two different problems?
Yes, they are. The vertical cracks are uneven watering. So basically think about, the tomato is a balloon, and it just got inflated too quickly, for the size of the balloon, and it popped. The ones that are horizontal are usually around the shoulder, what we call the shoulder of the tomato, where the stem connects to the fruit. And that's generally a part of the variety. So lots of heirlooms, you'll see those cracks on there. It's just part of it. It doesn't affect the taste. Thankfully, we're getting used to seeing how fruit really looks, not the hand-picked, almost
Almost like it's
Photoshop,
airbrushed.
I would say Photoshop that we
Yep.
see in the grocery store. You know, all the real ones, you know, have gone to make sauce in the can or tomato soup or fed livestock or whatever. But that's not the majority of fruit is going to have, and I'm not going to call it a blemish. It is a characteristic. So yes, if you see it at the top, no worries. If it's if it's vertical, it's uneven watering. And to your point, sometimes we can't help it. I mean,
Right.
we get a sudden rain shower,
Right
but
now.
that is it. Hopefully you are, because we still need some. But
It's coming your way, it looks like.
um, just know also with tomatoes, if you really don't want that cracking of the tomatoes, when the tomato first starts to blush, okay, we first see that that sign of color in the fruit. You can go ahead and pick that fruit and bring it in and set it on the counter. Please don't put your tomatoes in the refrigerator. You can set it on the counter. The ripening process has already started, and it will continue to start or continue to happen. You're not picking it green. When they talk about picking green tomatoes, that's where they have picked them dead green. There's no blush of color. They've put them in a container or into a room, and they have gassed them in order to force that ripening process. And they do that so that because shipping green tomatoes is possible. A ripe tomato would be bruised by the time it got to you. So you're not picking it green, but it is a way to get ahead of any cracking, a way to get ahead of birds and squirrels, or I know people with dogs that like to eat the tomatoes out of the vine. So don't be afraid to just keep an eye on it and go, you know, it's starting to ripen. I'll take it now so I can have it for my tomato sandwich.
My dad does that, and he always gets in trouble with my mom. And so now I'm going to save him on this one. I'm going to let her. Do you have any sources for straw and or alfalfa meal?
Okay, the alfalfa meal, I actually bring that in on pallets. I do that a couple of times a year, so you can contact me by supplies. A local source I would reach out to is Mineral Springs Feed and Seed.
Okay.
Alfalfa cubes, you probably could find them also at Tractor Supply or Southern States. Alfalfa cubes are a common feed for horses and rabbits and other livestock.
Okay.
It is included. We actually, in the Compost Complete I mentioned earlier, we actually include alfalfa meal in that as a plant-based mineral fertilizer. Rose gardeners have known about alfalfa meal for decades. It's one of the ones that if you really get into the rose gardening culture, they'll talk about alfalfa meal.
Okay. Is pond algae okay to put on a garden, and does it deter slugs?
I have no idea.
It's a new one for me too.
Yeah, I will have to do some homework on that one.
So the 30 to 50% shade, is that talking about the size of the shade cloth or the amount of light a particular cloth lets through?
It's the amount of light that, or it's the amount of shade
Yeah.
the cloth provides. So if I have a 30% shade cloth, 70% of the light is getting through. If I have a 50% shade cloth, then I've got 50% shade and 50% sun. So
It's sort
for
of like the
instance,
shades you put in your house, right? I mean, some of them let in more light than others, and then some of them are like blackout shades. You can't see anything.
right, exactly. So we time the putting on a shade cloth and taking it off depending on the day length. So for instance, if we're at 14 hours of sunlight right now, and I have a 50% shade cloth on there, then I'm getting 7 hours of shade and 7 hours of sun.
Okay.
So 50% is a lot. Generally, I would suggest a 20 to 30.
Right.
If you've got, now I'm going to clarify that a little bit. Our shade cloth is on top of a big structure, so it's not like we can take it on and take it off or put it on partially. It's on the whole thing. So you may decide to put up a shade cloth that only comes into effect from 3 to 6 in the afternoon. And then the rest of it, it's full on sun. So you've got to take into consideration the orientation of your garden. So for instance, if your rows are oriented north to south, the sun is going to go east to west, so it's going to go from the left to the right, right? It's going to go over, and so everything. So if that's the way, and that's the way all of our houses are oriented, is north to south. So we can get in the winter the full range of sunlight from sunup to sundown. So if I wanted to put up a shade in the afternoon, maybe I put my trellis on the west side. And so the more I get the morning sun, and then it crosses over, and now I'm getting that shade cast onto the rows. So it depends on your situation. One of the things that we've seen with a lot of new gardeners that are backyard, patio, small space gardening is using grow bags that are portable, or raised beds that are on casters. And they wheel them out for the sun and they wheel them in for the shade. I know several people that do that. I also know people who wheel them out for the sun and then wheel them back in to avoid the rabbits and the squirrels. So there's that added advantage.
Is that, yeah, those pots are, you have to have the industrial kind of wheels, right? Because the pots are heavy. You talked about the pruning tomatoes and cucumbers. So you said everything below the fruit set, the leaves below that, you're going to prune those off.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the person asked, does that actually help? And kind of assume it does, or you wouldn't keep doing it. So have you done that for years? I mean, that's not like a new thing you're doing, right?
No, we've done that from day one. So
Okay. Must be one.
any of the leaves that are below the fruit set are not contributing to that fruit.
Yeah.
It's the top leaves at the top that are doing the photosynthesis and sending the sugars to the fruit. So, and it's the bottom leaves, if you've grown a tomato plant, they're the first ones to show disease. They're the oldest leaves, they're
Right.
tired, they're close to the soil. And so we will, as soon as that fruit set happens, we'll go in. And when I say prune, we snap off, and they're very easy to just snap off from the stem. And if you do that in the morning when that plant is turgid, they will snap right off. Don't prune and leave a little nub, because that nub it just attracts disease. The stem will immediately self-heal where you've pulled that off. And it's just like suckering. We remove, we have in one row, we have like 120 tomato plants. And so, and they're very close together. They're like 10 inches apart. So we want a single leader. We want a direct channel from that root up the stem to that fruit set. We don't want a lot of vegetation that's out there and a lot of, dilution basically of the energy going to different places. So we have one stem, we have a lot of tomato plants very close together. but we have one stem, and then we remove anything that's not serving the plant. And then once that first fruit set ripens, we'll snap off that truss that has held the tomato, take off the leaves until the next one. So we basically have a bare vine, if you will, because an indeterminate tomato is a vining
Mhm.
fruit. It's not like a cucumber or a clematis where it's hooking itself onto things, but it's still a vining growth habit. Yeah, it'll be a naked vine up to that fruit.
So would that approach help with a loofah plant?
Gary? Got a scared little dog here.
Sorry. Let's see if I can find I think I got it. So would that help with a loofah plant? This person says they've got a lot of vine and leaves, but no fruit yet.
It will. We do the same thing with cucumbers. We do a lot of pruning. Now, I do not prune my loofah simply because we've got a lot of them, and that's not where we're putting our energy. But having said that, both cucumbers and loofahs are cucurbits. They're in the same family. They have the same growth habit. So if you really wanted to concentrate that vine, in order, first of all, to control it, because they get massive, they will take over everything. You can control it by pruning it. Now, believe it or not, cucumbers or cubits have suckers just like tomatoes. So it branches out. If you'll look, there's a stem, and then there's the leaf, and then in between, in that little notch, that's where another branch comes out, just like a tomato plant that we snap off. We snap off that sucker on cucumbers. And again, same reason as tomatoes. We want one vine, direct feeding from the root to the fruit, but we have lots of those one vines. So they're, again, planted 10 inches apart. But yes, to answer the question, yes, you can prune the loofah just as you would any curcumin.
Okay. This person asked, is it a good idea down under mulch to control weeds in walkways and flower beds?
Now, you broke up and the first part of the question I didn't hear.
Sorry. Is it a good idea to put preen down under mulch to control weeds in walkways and flower beds?
Okay. As a certified organic grower, we do not use anything like a preen. That is an herbicide. If you were using it, I wouldn't use it around anything you're eating. It is an herbicide. It will be in some form or fashion either kill your soil microbes or be taken up by the plant. And I would not recommend it for that reason.
Okay, fair enough. Is it okay to use tree bark for my vegetable garden mulch? She says she's hearing contradictions, that some people say it's okay and some don't.
There is some contradiction. We use wood mulch, chipped wood mulch, quite a bit. There's different kinds of wood mulch, so you have to be careful. You wouldn't want to use a cedar. Pine, there's some controversy that it will change the soil pH. We've not seen that to be really true, but we don't use it anywhere but around our blueberry bushes, which likes an acid soil anyway. I mentioned there's a gardening movement called Back to Eden that uses wood mulch quite thickly with good success. So I would suggest doing some research on that. The advantages are it doesn't break down as quickly as other mulches, but you really need to know your source and the type of tree. You wouldn't want anything, like I said, with cedar or black walnut. Black walnut has a poisonous compound in it. I would experiment a little bit with non-edible plants before moving on to your veggies.
Okay. How do I prevent bitter cucumbers?
Watering is one of the ways. The other is choosing varieties. There is a gene in some varieties that, under certain conditions, can cause bitterness. So you'll see varieties that'll say burpless also. But the gene, and I don't do Latin, so I can't tell you what it is, but it starts with a P. Just look it up. Just Google the bitterness gene in cucumbers, and it will direct you to varieties that lessen the chance. But consistent watering will also, yeah.
And back to the mulch thing, why not use cedar? Should we not use cedar mulch?
Cedar has oils in it. Think about why we traditionally use cedar. So we use it in pet beds to repel insects. We use it in raised gardening because it doesn't break down, and it's the oils in it. And whereas that might be okay for non-edibles, I personally wouldn't use it on my edibles.
Okay. Any more questions, guys? Lots of good questions. That's great. We had a lot of thank yous in the chat box. That's wonderful. Great information. We had a few people fall out because their power went out. I kept getting texts that I'm off. The power went out. So the storm is probably headed your way because it wasn't bad here, but I think a little to the east it probably will be. And I'm in Waxhaw. Okay, so no more questions. That's great. So she's got her information out there for any of you that need to contact her. If you have other questions, if you want to contact Mary. Also, I will put this recording out on our YouTube site, and that will be that link will be posted on our website, and we'll post it on Facebook as well. Thank you all for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you next time. Thank you. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you.
Wonderful. I learned so much. I've got all these notes. Thank you. Thanks. Good night.
Night.